You show up every Sunday. You listen closely to the sermon. You might even take detailed notes. But despite all that careful attention, your faith feels stagnant. You're doing the work of learning, but spiritually you feel like you're fading. The book of James calls this a specific kind of self-deception. Chapter 1, verse 22 warns that when we mistake the act of hearing the truth for the act of actually living it, we trick ourselves into thinking we're growing. It's how a vibrant faith turns into a dusty old library. We become a collection of unread volumes, minds packed with theological truth, just sitting on the shelf, never taken down, never used. Gathering biblical knowledge is essential, but without application, that knowledge sits idle. It cannot change a life it never touches. If you wonder why you aren't experiencing God's power at work within you, it is likely because the learning process stopped at your ears. How do we bridge that gap? We'll use a framework called the Word to Action Audit. First, you need to gather your tools. Find a Bible, a blank journal, a pen, and set aside 15 minutes of uninterrupted time. Setting up this physical workspace is an intentional step. It forces your mind to pivot away from passive listening and into active preparation. Step 1 is the knowledge capture. Your objective here is simple. Isolate just one single instruction you've recently learned from Scripture. For example, you might write down Philippians 4, 6-8, noting the specific command. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer, let your requests be made known to God. That brings us to step 2, the honesty audit. Now you need to identify the exact behavioral gap between the truth you just wrote down and how you are actually operating today. This is where you have to be precise. Avoid generalized statements like, I need to trust God more. Avoid making excuses for your circumstances. Look at this model. On one side is your known truth. On the other is your current action. You need to explicitly write down what fills this empty space in the middle, exactly how you are currently failing to live out the truth you identified. You cannot correct a course until you know exactly where you drifted off the path. Pinpointing your exact point of behavioral failure is mandatory. Step 3 is the action protocol. You are going to draft a physical, immediate, and tangible action step, and you are going to execute it today. Abstract intentions hit a dead end. We must replace them with concrete, measurable tasks tied to a specific trigger. Instead of a vague goal like, I will worry less, write a concrete protocol. Whenever anxious about my job, I will pray for 60 seconds. To prevent feeling overwhelmed, enforce a strict limit on yourself. Tackle only one action item per session. In John 13, Jesus tells his disciples, if you know these things, blessed are you if you do them. The divine blessing isn't in the knowing, it is tied directly to the physical execution of the task. Abstract spiritual goals remain abstract until they are broken down into defined, scheduled physical behaviors. The final step is the prayer wrapping. This is where you ask the Spirit, your helper, for the strength to actually execute your drafted plan. Spend the next 60 seconds in prayer, focusing your request entirely on this one upcoming action step. Human willpower usually isn't enough to break deep habits. We rely on the Spirit to provide the internal strength we don't possess on our own. Your written plan gives you the map, but relying on the Spirit provides the engine you need to actually move. Look down at your journal. If you followed these steps, you now hold a localized, concrete action plan in your hands. But be careful. The final trap of the library is feeling satisfied just because you made a plan. Stopping here is the ultimate form of self-deception. We want our lives and our churches to transition from dusty archives into vibrant galleries of living experience, where truth is tested and applied. So here is your final instruction. Take that physical piece of paper, step away from your workspace, and immediately execute your scheduled action. This is how we answer the directive from James. Be doers of the word and not hearers only. True spiritual growth isn't a measure of how much you know. It is exclusively the result of truth transformed into active, real-world obedience.